God sees what we cannot. No one can hide their true nature from Him, while people can present themselves in ways that seem admirable, loving, or trustworthy. The Lord is never deceived. He peers beyond appearances, cutting through the surface to examine the heart. As humans, we often find ourselves dazzled by charisma, swayed by words, or blinded by emotions. But when you walk with God, He grants you the ability to see what is unseen in due time. His wisdom and knowledge surpass the limitations of human understanding, unveiling the motivations and intentions that lie beneath. What may take us years to comprehend, God can reveal in a moment. It's not a coincidence when He begins to peel back the layers of deceit in someone's life. It's His way of ensuring you stay aligned with His purpose. Even when someone's actions seem harmless on the surface, trust that God knows what lies within their spirit. When God decides to reveal their true face, it is not to humiliate or harm, but to teach, guide, and protect His children. Remember, His vision is flawless. He knows the end from the beginning. If you've ever wondered why someone seems so different once their true colors were exposed, it's because the God of truth cannot allow lies to linger forever. Trust Him to reveal what is hidden so that you can walk in freedom, wisdom, and victory. The power of discernment allows us to navigate life's hidden agendas. Discernment is not just a gift, it is a lifeline in a world full of pretense and manipulation. God has equipped His children with the ability to distinguish between what is real and what is counterfeit, but it requires a deep connection with Him to activate and sharpen that gift. Discernment isn't about suspicion or judgment, it's a spiritual radar that helps you sense what words or actions cannot reveal. Sometimes you can't quite put your finger on it, but your spirit feels unsettled around certain people or situations. That is God whispering to you, guiding you to tread carefully. Hidden agendas are not always obvious. The enemy often disguises himself as an angel of light, and people with harmful intentions may dress their motives in kindness and charm. Without discernment, you may fall into traps designed to derail your purpose, but when you walk closely with God and seek His wisdom, He grants you insight beyond what is visible. You'll begin to see patterns, recognize inconsistencies, and sense when someone's words don't align with their actions. Discernment protects you from aligning with the wrong people or investing in the wrong opportunities. It helps you see past the surface and into the soul. Have you ever wondered why God gave Solomon such incredible wisdom? It wasn't just for leadership, it was to navigate the complexities of human behavior and judge rightly in difficult situations. That same wisdom is available to you today if you ask for it. When discernment is at work, you can navigate challenges with confidence. Even when others try to manipulate, deceive, or mislead, their schemes will be exposed in the light of truth. Discernment doesn't just protect you, it positions you. It positions you to walk in alignment with God's will, to choose wisely, and to remain steadfast even when others are falling into trap. Ask God to heighten your discernment so you can walk through life with clarity, confidence, and purpose. In His light, no agenda can remain hidden, and no scheme can prevail. God removes masks to protect His children from deception. People often wear masks to hide their true selves, whether out of fear, pride, or a desire for control. They may present one face to the world while their true intentions remain hidden. The masks they wear are often a way of manipulating situations or avoiding the consequences of their actions. But God, in His infinite wisdom and love, will not allow His children to be led astray by these facades. When He sees that a person's mask is leading you away from His plan for your life, He will remove it. Sometimes in ways that seem painful, but always for your protection. It's important to recognize that God doesn't expose someone's true nature for the sake of embarrassment or retribution. He does it out of love so that you can stay aligned with His purpose for your life. When God removes the mask, it's not just to show you the truth about that person, it's to show you something about yourself as well. It's a wake-up call that invites you to rely more on God's wisdom than your own understanding. Sometimes we want to hold on to relationships or situations that we believe are beneficial, but God knows better. He knows when someone's mask is hiding jealousy, deceit, or manipulation, and in His mercy, He will reveal what is hidden so that we can avoid unnecessary pain and heartache. The revelation might come through a sudden event, a conversation, or a series of circumstances that cause the mask to slip. Whatever form it takes, when God exposes the truth, it is a divine act of protection. Trust that God's timing in removing these masks is perfect. Sometimes we may feel confused or hurt when someone's true face is revealed, but remember that God is not allowing the exposure to destroy you. He's allowing it to deliver you. It's a form of divine intervention, a way of showing you who is truly for you and who is not. It frees you from the bondage of deception and gives you the clarity to move forward with purpose and peace. When we see people for who they truly are, we are also reminded of the importance of being genuine in our own lives. God desires that we walk in truth, not in pretension. He calls us to shed our own mask and be real with ourselves, with others, and with Him. When we live authentically, there's no need to fear exposure because our hearts are already aligned with God's truth. And when someone else's mask is removed, we can stand firm, knowing that God has done it for our protection and growth, ensuring that His plans for us remain unhindered. The exposure of someone's true face is part of God's plan for our growth. It can be difficult to understand why certain relationships, situations, or people seem to reveal their true nature at particular moments in our lives, but there is purpose in it. God uses every circumstance, whether good or painful, as an opportunity for us to grow spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. The exposure of hidden motives, toxic behaviors, or deceitful faces is a divine tool designed to shape us and refine our character. When we experience these moments of revelation, we can either choose to see them as setbacks or recognize them as God's way of making us stronger. One of the greatest lessons we learn in life is the ability to trust God's process. The exposure of a person's true face might not always come at a time when we expect it or when we want it, but it always comes when God knows we're ready. These moments often force us to reevaluate our relationships, our choices, and our own sense of self-worth. God uses these exposures not only to protect us, but to prepare us for the next phase of our lives. They are stepping stones in our journey, challenging us to grow in wisdom, discernment, and faith. Sometimes God exposes the truth in someone's life to shift our focus from the wrong sources of support or validation to the right ones. Perhaps we've placed our trust in someone who does not have our best interest at heart, or we've become too reliant on a relationship that was not meant to last. God loves us too much to allow us to remain stuck in toxic situations, and so He allows the truth to come to light. This exposure serves as a wake-up call, pushing us to trust in Him more fully, lean into His wisdom, and surround ourselves with those who genuinely care for us. Through these moments of exposure, God also teaches us how to respond with grace and strength. When someone's true face is revealed, it can stir up feelings of anger, betrayal, or confusion. But God calls us to rise above these emotions and respond with the wisdom and love He has given us. The way we handle exposure is just as important as the exposure itself. God uses these moments to refine our character, teaching us patience, forgiveness, and resilience. He wants us to come out of these trials stronger, more compassionate, and more aligned with His will. In the long run, these exposures reveal the truth not only about the people around us, but also about our own heart. We are often forced to confront our own biases, judgments, and desires, and God uses this as a moment of sanctification. We learn to discern who is truly meant for us and who isn't. We learn to trust God more deeply, knowing that He is always working behind the scenes to protect us and guide us toward His perfect plan. The exposure of someone's true face is not a punishment, it's a blessing in disguise. It opens our eyes to the truth, allowing us to move forward in life with a clearer sense of direction. While it may be painful or uncomfortable, it is a key part of God's divine plan to help us grow into the people He has called us to be. With every exposure, God is shaping us, teaching us, and preparing us for the future He has already designed. Betrayals and disappointments are divine tools to reveal hidden intentions. When we face betrayal or disappointment, our immediate reaction is often pain, confusion, and frustration. We wonder why someone we trusted or invested in would hurt us, why a situation we thought was meant for our good would turn sour. But what we may not always recognize in the midst of our hurt is that God uses these very experiences to reveal the truth behind people's actions and help us see might have missed otherwise. These moments of betrayal and disappointment are not accidents, they are divine tools in God's hands intended to protect us, refine us, and guide us closer to His purpose. When betrayal occurs, it can feel like the ground beneath you is shaking. A close friend, a colleague, a family member, someone you never thought would harm you turns out to be someone you can no longer trust. The wounds caused by betrayal are often the deepest because they strike at the core of our relationships. However, these moments of heartache, though painful, are often the very things that expose a person's true intentions. Perhaps they never had your best interest at heart. Or perhaps their own insecurities and desires led them to act in ways that ultimately caused harm. Whatever the reason, betrayal forces us to look beyond the surface and see the true nature of a person or a situation. In these painful moments, we often begin to ask, why did this happen? And what did I do wrong? But sometimes the real question is, what is God trying to show me? God in His infinite wisdom allows these betrayals to happen not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to reveal hidden truths. He opens our eyes to the motives and behaviors of those around us so that we can make decisions that align with His purpose for our lives. The truth that is exposed through betrayal might be uncomfortable, but it serves to protect us from deeper harm down the road. Disappointments, too, serve a similar purpose. Whether it's a failed opportunity, an unfulfilled dream, or an unmet expectation, disappointments force us to face the reality of a situation. They challenge our assumptions and remind us that not everything goes according to our plans, but disappointments also reveal where we have placed our trust. Have we trusted in the wrong things or the wrong people? Have we placed our hope in a future that was never meant to be? Sometimes God allows disappointment to show us where our priorities need to shift. He wants to direct our attention away from false hopes and redirect us toward what truly matters, His will for our lives. These betrayals and disappointments are not just about uncovering the hidden intentions of others, they are also opportunities for self-reflection. God uses these moments to show us how to better guard our hearts, how to walk in wisdom, and how to rely more on Him than on our own understanding. When someone betrays us, it may expose a weakness in our own trust or our ability to discern people's true intentions. God allows us to learn from these experiences so that we can grow stronger and more vigilant in the future. While betrayal and disappointment are painful, they are not without purpose. God uses them as part of His greater plan to help us grow, to teach us about the nature of people, and to guide us closer to His will. As hard as it may be, we must learn to embrace these moments as opportunities for revelation and transformation. Rather than allowing bitterness to take root in our hearts, we can choose to trust that God is using these experiences to expose what is hidden and ultimately move us toward the good plans He has for us. When we allow God to reveal the truth, we open ourselves up to a deeper level of understanding and a stronger foundation built on His truth, not on the mask people wear. Trust in God's timing. Exposure happens when it serves His purpose. It can be incredibly challenging to trust God's timing, especially when we're in the midst of betrayal, disappointment, or confusion. We may wonder why someone's true nature is only revealed after we've invested so much in them, or why it takes so long for the truth to come to light. But God's timing is never random and it's never an accident. Exposure happens at precisely the right moment when it serves His divine purpose for our lives. God's timing in exposing the true faces of people around us often comes when we're ready to handle the truth and when the exposure will be the most beneficial for us. If the truth were revealed too early, we might not have the wisdom, maturity, or discernment to process it or respond in a way that honors God. But God, in His perfect wisdom, knows exactly when the right moment arrives. He knows what we need and when we need it. His timing ensures that we are prepared to handle the revelation with grace, understanding, and strength. Sometimes we might feel frustrated with how long it takes for the truth to come to light. We may be asking, why is this person allowed to continue deceiving me? Or why does it feel like I have to endure this situation for so long? But God is never in a hurry. His timing is always purposeful, even when we can't see it. Exposure might come in the form of a sudden event, a conversation, or a series of circumstances that gradually unravel the truth. Each moment is carefully orchestrated by God to fulfill His greater purpose for our lives. Trusting in God's timing also means trusting that He is working behind the scenes when we can't see it. Just because the truth hasn't been exposed yet doesn't mean God isn't already at work. He is constantly orchestrating events, preparing hearts, and shifting circumstances to ensure that His will is done. Sometimes we need to wait and allow God to work His process in His own time. During this waiting period, God may be using this time to refine us, teach us patience, and help us grow in faith. He may also be allowing us to build the strength we need to handle the truth when it is revealed. Remember that God is never caught off guard by people's actions. He sees everything, and nothing is hidden from Him. The delay in exposure is not a sign of neglect, but a sign of divine strategy. He knows what is best for us, and He knows how to protect us. God's delay in exposing someone's true face is often a way of preventing unnecessary harm to us. Perhaps there are things that need to happen first, situations that need to unfold, people who need to be moved out of the way, or our own hearts that need to be prepared for what we will see. When God finally exposes the truth, it is always at the right time and in the right way. Exposure doesn't come to destroy us, but to bring us clarity, protection, and peace. It's God's way of ensuring that we are not walking in deception or misunderstanding. He is looking out for us, guiding us toward what is best and revealing the truth when it will have the greatest impact on our growth and well-being. The key is to trust God's perfect timing and not rush the process. Trust that God's purpose will prevail and the truth will come to light at the right moment, when it will not only reveal the true nature of those around us, but also help us move forward with greater wisdom and understanding. In His timing, exposure becomes a stepping stone to our healing, growth, and ultimate victory. So rest in the confidence that God's timing is always perfect, and the exposure you seek will come when it serves His greater purpose for your life. Hidden truths often surface when we least expect it, but need it most. Life has a way of revealing the truth at the most unexpected times, and often those moments feel inconvenient or unsettling. We may find ourselves caught off guard by the sudden revelation of someone's true intentions or the uncovering of a hidden agenda that we had no idea existed. These truths don't come when we plan for them. They surface in the midst of our daily routines when we're least prepared for the impact. However, while these revelations may catch us by surprise, they always come at exactly the moment we need them most. God, in His infinite wisdom, orchestrates the timing of these exposures with precision. He understands our hearts, our vulnerabilities, and our need for clarity. The truth might come in the midst of a difficult season when we are emotionally raw, or at a time when we feel most helpless. But it is in these very moments that God knows we are ready to handle the truth, even if it's painful. In many cases, it's only after we've gone through some challenges or endured certain trials that we are strong enough to process the truth and respond in a way that leads to healing and growth. For instance, perhaps you've been in a relationship where you sensed something wasn't right, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. Then, out of nowhere, a situation arises or a conversation takes place and the truth is revealed in a way that hits you hard. It might be something you didn't want to face, or it may be information that stings deeply. But in hindsight, you realize that this truth was necessary for your emotional, spiritual growth. It forces you to stop, reassess your situation, and make decisions that align with God's purpose for your life. God often allows hidden truths to surface when we need to be steered in a new direction, when we become too comfortable in relationship situations or environments that no longer serve us. The moment of revelation might be uncomfortable, but it's a necessary wake-up call. It shifts our perspective, opens our eyes to what has been hidden, and forces us to face reality head-on. These exposures are acts of grace. They are God's way of ensuring that we don't remain stagnant in relationships or situations that are not aligned with His will. What's important to remember is that God doesn't expose the truth to punish or hurt us, but to protect and guide us. Even when the truth is painful or difficult to accept, it is a necessary part of our journey. It frees us from the bondage of deception, enabling us to walk in freedom and truth. The truth may come when we least expect it, but it always comes when we need it most, because God knows what we need to move forward. When these truths are revealed, it's an invitation to grow. We may not fully understand why things unfolded the way they did, but we can trust that God, in His perfect timing, has a greater plan for us. His purpose for our lives will always unfold with clarity and direction when we trust Him to reveal the truth at the right moment. So while these moments of revelation may feel disruptive, they are ultimately part of God's redemptive work in our lives. He's clearing the path for us, teaching us to walk in wisdom, and guiding us toward His perfect will. In the end, we'll see that these unexpected truths were not setbacks, but opportunities for us to step into a future that is clearer, stronger, and more aligned with God's purpose. The trials of life are meant to refine, not destroy us, even when exposure brings pain. Life's trials, especially those that involve the exposure of someone's true nature or hidden motives, often feel like they're meant to break us. When we're betrayed, hurt, or deceived, the pain can feel overwhelming. The weight of these experiences can make us question why God would allow such suffering, especially when the exposure of someone's true face causes us emotional turmoil. But we must remember that every trial we face has a purpose, and that purpose is not destruction but refinement. God allows us to go through difficult situations because they are opportunities for spiritual growth, and exposure is often part of that refining process. When God exposes the true intentions of others, it can feel like a direct attack on our hearts and trust. But in reality, it's a divine opportunity to shed the layers of deception that we've been living under, whether it's deception about others or even deception about ourselves. Exposure is not meant to leave us broken. It is meant to break off the things that are not aligned with God's will for our lives. Consider how gold is refined. The process involves intense heat and pressure, removing the impurities that diminish its value. Similarly, God uses the trials we face to purify us. When we experience betrayal, disappointment, or the painful revelation of someone's true nature, it can feel like the heat is being turned up. But this pressure is meant to refine our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. It forces us to rely more on God, to grow in our faith, and to develop a deeper sense of wisdom and discernment. Exposure, while painful, is a catalyst for healing. Sometimes we can be so wrapped up in the lies or false perceptions we've allowed into our lives that we don't even realize how they're affecting us. But when God pulls back the veil and reveals the truth, it may sting at first, but it ultimately opens the door to freedom. When we can see things for what they truly are, we are no longer bound by deception or false hope. The truth, even when it's painful, sets us free from the chains of ignorance, and in that freedom we find healing and clarity. God's goal isn't to crush us with trials, it's to use those trials to strengthen our faith, deepen our relationship with Him, and prepare us for the future He has for us. When someone's true face is revealed, it might initially feel like we've lost something or someone precious, but in reality, we've gained the ability to move forward with greater wisdom and strength. We're now free to make choices that align with God's will for our lives, rather than staying entangled in toxic relationships or situations. Moreover, trials reveal the true condition of our hearts. How we respond to the pain of exposure is a reflection of where we are in our spiritual journey. Do we turn to God for comfort, wisdom, and healing, or do we let bitterness and anger take root? The way we navigate through life's trials, especially the trials of exposure, shows us where we need to grow and what areas of our lives need refinement. It's in those moments that God can shape us, build our character, and prepare us for the next phase of His plan. Even though exposure can be painful, it is ultimately an act of grace. God does not want us to remain in toxic situations, nor does He want us to be deceived by others or by our own misconception. Through the trials and the pain of exposure, He is lovingly guiding us toward truth, healing, and wholeness. And while the process may be difficult, the outcome is always worth it. We emerge from the fire of trials stronger, more focused, and better equipped to fulfill God's purpose for our lives. Remember, no trial, no matter how painful, is ever wasted. God uses every moment of suffering to refine us, to make us more like Him, and to prepare us for what lies ahead. Trust that the exposure you're experiencing is part of God's loving process to refine you and shape you into the person He's calling you to be. Even in the most difficult moments, God is working behind the scenes to ensure that you come out of the fire stronger, purer, and more aligned with His perfect will. Exposure often leads to greater clarity and discernment in future relationships. When we experience betrayal, deceit, or the unveiling of someone's true character, the immediate emotional impact can be overwhelming. But with time and a shift in perspective, these moments of exposure become invaluable lessons that shape how we approach future relationships and situations. What may have initially felt like a setback or a painful revelation becomes a powerful tool for growth, helping us to develop sharper discernment and wisdom in how we interact with others moving forward. When God exposes someone's true face, it's like He's given us a spiritual lens to see more clearly. We are able to understand the nature of certain individuals and the dynamics of relationships in a new light. Often, we go through life with a sense of trust or naivety, giving others the benefit of the doubt and assuming the best about them. However, when someone's true character is revealed, it teaches us to be more cautious, to trust with discernment, and to carefully evaluate the motives of those around us. We learn that not everyone who comes into our lives is aligned with our best interests or God's plan for us. And that's an important lesson to carry forward. As painful as it is, exposure can make us wiser and more self-aware. We begin to recognize the warning signs, the red flags that we may have ignored in the past, behaviors that we once overlooked. These lessons help us set healthy boundaries, maintain our peace, and protect ourselves from future harm. Rather than walking into relationships or situations blindly, we now approach them with a clearer understanding of what to look for and what to avoid. We learn to ask God for wisdom and discernment before we fully invest in any person or circumstance, knowing that He will guide us toward the right people and the right opportunities. Moreover, exposure can help us refine our own character. Sometimes in the midst of betrayal or hurt, we may be so focused on what others have done to us that we overlook our own responsibility in the situation. Through exposure, God gives us the opportunity to reflect on our own actions, choices, and weaknesses. He invites us to ask ourselves, did I ignore red flags? Did I place too much trust in someone too quickly? Did I allow my own desires or insecurities to cloud my judgment? These reflections help us grow and mature so we're not repeating the same mistakes in future relationships. When we're exposed to the truth about others, we're also exposed to deeper truths about ourselves. We learn what we value most, what we need in relationships, and what we're willing to tolerate or not tolerate. This self-awareness enables us to make better choices moving forward, to surround ourselves with people who genuinely have our best interests at heart, and to build relationships that are rooted in authenticity, respect, and mutual care. Ultimately, exposure teaches us how to walk in wisdom and trust God's guidance in our relationships. We learn that not everyone who comes into our lives is meant to stay, and that's okay. God uses exposure to help us discern who should be part of our inner circle and who should be kept at a distance. We learn to see people through a lens of grace and truth, knowing that God has a purpose for every relationship in our lives, even the ones that end in painful revelations. Moving forward, we become more confident in our ability to make sound decisions, protect our hearts, and build strong, healthy relationships. The clarity that comes from exposure enables us to grow in wisdom and live with greater intention, knowing that God is always guiding us toward the relationships that will help us fulfill His purpose. Exposure is not the end, it's the beginning of a new chapter, where we are better equipped to discern truth, avoid deception, and walk in God's wisdom as we continue on our journey. Exposure brings us closer to understanding God's will for our lives, even when it's difficult. When God exposes the true nature of people or situations, it's not just about revealing the character of others, but it's also about drawing us closer to Him. Each exposure is a divine invitation to align ourselves more closely with God's will, even when the process feels uncomfortable or painful. It's in these moments of revelation that God's greater plan for our lives begins to unfold with more clarity, and we are given the opportunity to step into a deeper understanding of His purpose for us. God's will often becomes clearer when we are forced to face the truth. The lies, deceptions, and distractions that can cloud our vision are stripped away, and we are left with a raw understanding of where we stand in our relationship with Him and where we stand in our relationships with others. When we see the truth about someone's intentions or a situation's reality, it forces us to make a decision. Do we continue on the path we've been walking, or do we trust God to lead us down a different path? Exposure brings us face to face with our choices, and it invites us to make decisions that align more closely with God's will. While it's easy to see exposure as something negative, it's important to understand that God uses these moments to redirect our lives toward His divine plan. He's showing us what's not meant for us so that we can move toward what He has prepared. For example, when a relationship or a business opportunity falls apart because of deception or betrayal, it's God's way of steering us away from something that could have ultimately hindered our growth or pulled us further from His purpose. The truth that comes with exposure serves as a course correction, guiding us towards something better. In times of exposure, we are also reminded of our dependence on God. When people or situations reveal their true faces, it's a reminder that we cannot rely on our own understanding. God is the only one who truly knows what is best for us, and His guidance is always trustworthy. Exposure humbles us, reminding us that we cannot control every aspect of our lives and that we need to lean on God more than ever. It's an invitation to surrender our plans, our ideas of how things should unfold, and allow God to take the lead. God's will is not always easy to discern, especially when we're caught up in the pain of exposure. However, when we trust Him, we realize that every painful moment of exposure is a stepping stone toward greater clarity and understanding. We may not always understand why things unfold the way they do, but we can trust that God is using these moments to refine our hearts, align our lives, and draw us closer to His perfect purpose. What's important is that we don't allow the pain of exposure to cloud our judgment. We must resist the temptation to grow bitter or resentful. Instead, we need to seek God's wisdom and guidance as we navigate the truth that has been revealed. He is always present, ready to lead us into deeper truth and understanding. The exposure of truth is not meant to tear us down, but to build us up, to draw us closer to God's perfect will for our lives, and to help us grow into the people He has created us to be. When we embrace the lessons learned through exposure, we open ourselves to greater intimacy with God. He is constantly working behind the scenes to reveal His will for us, and often it's in these moments of revelation that we experience a deeper understanding of who He is and how He works in our lives. Exposure becomes an opportunity to trust God more fully, to follow His leading more closely, and to live in alignment with His purpose. It's not a punishment, it's a divine invitation to grow, to trust, and to step into the fullness of the life He has for us. God uses exposure to separate us from harmful influences and lead us to better surroundings. In many cases, exposure doesn't just reveal the true faces of others, it also serves to remove us from toxic or harmful environment. Often we can become so entrenched in unhealthy relationships, situations, or habits that we fail to recognize the negative impact they have on our lives. We may not fully grasp how these influences are holding us back from our true potential or from walking in alignment with God's will. But when God exposes the truth, it is often His way of clearing the way for something better. Exposure acts as a form of divine protection. When people's true nature or intentions are revealed, it can be painful, but it also serves to shield us from further harm. It might feel like we are losing something or someone we valued, but in reality, God is removing what no longer serves us. He's separating us from environments, relationships, or situations that are not conducive to our growth, peace, or alignment with His purpose. By exposing the truth, God is protecting us from future hurt, disappointment, and confusion. Sometimes we become so attached to people, places, or things that we don't realize they're keeping us from stepping into what God has planned for us. We may be holding on to relationships or opportunities that are not meant for us because we fear letting go or because we're uncertain of what comes next. But exposure forces us to face the truth, to see things as they really are, and to make the choice to move forward. God's way of revealing the truth, even when it's difficult, is a way of freeing us from the chains of attachment to what is harmful. Think about the people in your life who may have been toxic or manipulative. Before the truth was exposed, you might have tried to make the relationship work, or you might have overlooked their flaws because you wanted to believe the best. But once their true nature is revealed, you are given the clarity to step away from them and to begin the healing process. In these moments, God is providing an opportunity for you to protect your peace, your mental and emotional health, and your spiritual well-being. You are no longer bound by false hope or unhealthy attachments. In the same way, exposure can help us see how our environments may be stifling our growth. Whether it's a job that drains us, a friendship that brings negativity, or a community that lacks support and encouragement, the truth can highlight the need for change. God will expose these areas to show us that we need to seek better environments that align with His will. He may lead us to find new opportunities, new friendships, or a new church community that helps us grow and thrive. Exposure also helps us see the value of the people and places that truly nurture us. Once the harmful influences are removed, we can more clearly appreciate the relationships and environments that bring out the best in us. It's like clearing away the clutter to make space for what really matters. The truth sets us free from unhealthy attachments and leads us to healthier connections and more fulfilling environments where we can flourish. Ultimately, God uses exposure to help us realign with His purpose by removing distractions, negativity, and toxic influences from our lives. It's His way of guiding us toward a future where we can be more effective, more peaceful, and more in tune with His will. Even when it's hard to let go of certain people or situations, we can trust that God is leading us to better, safer, and more supportive surroundings that will help us grow and live according to His plan. Exposure, while painful in the moment, is a gift that opens the door to greater freedom, healing, and alignment with God's perfect purpose for our life. Exposure strengthens our faith and reliance on God's timing. When the truth is revealed and people's true intentions or situations are exposed, it often forces us to confront difficult realities that we would rather avoid. These moments of exposure can shake us to our core, causing us to question everything we thought we knew about the people around us, the situations we're in, and sometimes even our own decisions. But in those moments of uncertainty and pain, God calls us to trust Him more deeply than ever before. What we often fail to realize in the midst of exposure is that it's not just the circumstances that are changing, it's our faith being refined. Exposure removes the false layers of security and self-reliance that we've built up, revealing our vulnerability and our need for God's wisdom and direction. We are forced to lean on Him in ways that we hadn't anticipated, seeking His guidance to navigate the new reality we find ourselves in. It's in these moments of revelation that we are reminded that God is in control and that His timing is always perfect. When the truth is exposed, it may feel like everything is falling apart. The relationships, the plans, or the hopes we had can seem shattered or beyond repair. But in reality, it's in these moments of brokenness that God does His most profound work. The exposure of truth may cause us to grieve, to feel lost, or to question the future, but it also brings us to a place where we can let go of our own plans and trust in God's. We can no longer rely on our own understanding or human relationships to guide us. We must turn to God and trust that His timing will bring healing, restoration, and a new path forward. This is where faith truly becomes active. Trusting in God's timing means acknowledging that His plan is greater than anything we can imagine, and that even when things feel uncertain, He is working behind the scenes for our good. It's in the difficult times of exposure that we learn to surrender our timelines and desires to Him. We let go of the need for instant answers or quick fixes and learn to wait on God's perfect timing. It's not easy, but it's in this waiting that our faith grows stronger. Moreover, these moments of exposure provide us with an opportunity to experience God's faithfulness. While we may not understand the full picture right away, as we trust in His timing, we begin to see how He uses even the most painful revelations for our benefit. Over time, we witness how God makes a way when there seems to be no way, how He turns even our disappointments into opportunities for growth, and how He uses exposure to guide us to a better future than we could have planned for ourselves. It's important to remember that God's timing is never early or late, it is always on time. He exposes the truth at the precise moment we need to hear it. And though it may be difficult, it is always for our growth and protection. God never exposes the truth to harm us, but to strengthen us, refine our character, and draw us closer to His heart. And though the timing may not always match our expectations, we can trust that it's exactly what we need in that moment. So when we find ourselves in the midst of exposure, when the truth is revealed in ways that we didn't expect or want, we can rest in the assurance that God is at work. Our faith in His timing grows stronger as we trust that He is using every revelation, every painful truth to lead us to a better place, a place of deeper intimacy with Him, greater wisdom, and a clearer path toward the future He has designed for us. Exposure doesn't break us, it builds our faith as we learn to rely more fully on God's perfect timing and His plan for our life. Exposure reveals the depth of God's grace and mercy in our lives. While exposure often brings to light the true nature of others, it also highlights our own flaws, weaknesses, and the areas in our lives where we need God's grace and mercy the most. In moments of exposure, when our trust is broken or our expectations are shattered, it's easy to focus on the hurt and the betrayal. However, we must remember that God's grace is at work, even in the most painful moments, covering us with love and compassion and offering us the healing and restoration we need. When God exposes the truth about a person or situation, it can be a moment of deep reflection for us as well. We may find ourselves questioning how we missed the warning signs or why we allowed ourselves to be deceived. In these moments of self-reflection, we may feel ashamed or regretful, but it is in these very moments that God's grace shines the brightest. God doesn't expose the truth to condemn us. He does it to lead us to a place of healing, forgiveness, and restoration. His grace is the balm that soothes our wounds and helps us to process the pain with a heart of understanding and humility. Moreover, exposure reminds us that none of us are perfect and we all need God's mercy. It can be easy to point fingers at others when their true nature is revealed, but we must also recognize that we too are flawed and in need of redemption. The exposure of someone else's wrongdoings often brings us face to face with our own mistakes, our own need for repentance, and our own dependence on God's grace. It's a humbling experience that calls us to extend the same grace and forgiveness that God has shown us. In the midst of exposure, God's mercy invites us to let go of bitterness and resentment. It's natural to feel hurt when we discover the truth about someone who has deceived us, betrayed us, or hurt us in some way. But God's mercy calls us to forgive not just for their sake, but for our own. Holding on to anger and resentment only keeps us bound to the past and prevents us from moving forward. God's grace frees us from the chains of unforgiveness, allowing us to experience peace and healing, even in the face of betrayal or disappointment. God's mercy also helps us see the bigger picture when exposure occurs. While we may be hurt or confused by what has been revealed, God's mercy reminds us that He is always at work behind the scenes, using every circumstance to shape us and draw us closer to Him. Even when we can't fully understand why something is happening or why a relationship has fallen apart, we can trust that God is using it for our good. His mercy extends beyond our immediate pain, and His grace is sufficient to carry us through. As we process the exposure of others' true faces, we must also remember to turn our focus to God's mercy in our own lives. We are all in need of grace, whether we are the ones who have been hurt or the ones who have made mistakes. Exposure in this sense becomes a reminder that we are all on a journey of growth and transformation. God's grace covers our shortcomings, heals our wounds, and enables us to forgive, move forward, and learn from every experience. Ultimately, exposure teaches us that God's grace is greater than any betrayal, hurt, or disappointment we may face. No matter how painful the truth may be, God's mercy is greater, and His love is more than enough to bring healing and restoration. Exposure reveals not only the true nature of others, but also the depth of God's grace, which is always at work in our lives, guiding us toward wholeness and peace. Even in the darkest moments of exposure, God's grace shines brightly, reminding us that He is with us, working all things together for our good and His glory. Exposure strengthens our character and spiritual maturity. One of the most significant aspects of experiencing exposure is the way it refines our character. When people's true intentions are revealed or when we're forced to confront hard truths, it's easy to become discouraged or disheartened. Yet, in these very moments, God is shaping us into stronger, more resilient individuals who can withstand future trials and face challenges with greater faith and wisdom. Exposure is a tool that God uses to mold us, to teach us to rely on Him, and to help us grow into the people He has called us to be. In the aftermath of exposure, we are given the opportunity to choose how we respond. We can either allow the truth to harden our hearts, leading us to bitterness and anger, or we can allow God to use the experience to cultivate patience, humility, and forgiveness within us. It's through our response that our character is tested and strengthened. If we choose to forgive and move forward with grace, we grow spiritually and emotionally. If we choose to harbor resentment, we risk stunning our growth and missing out on the lessons God is trying to teach us. Exposure forces us to confront our own weaknesses and blind spots. We may realize that in some situations we've been too trusting or naive, and this exposure can be humbling, but it's also an opportunity to develop greater discernment. We learn to read situations and people more wisely to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. We also learn to rely on God more deeply, asking for His wisdom and guidance as we navigate relationships and life's complexities. Furthermore, exposure teaches us how to navigate conflict and difficulty with grace and integrity. It's easy to react out of hurt or anger when someone betrays us or when we're confronted with painful truths. But exposure is a refining fire that encourages us to grow in patience, self-control, and emotional intelligence. We learn to respond in a way that honors God and reflects His character, rather than reacting impulsively or out of hurt. The more we allow God to shape us through exposure, the more we grow into individuals who can handle life's challenges with grace and poise. Through exposure, we also learn to value authenticity and integrity. When others' true faces are revealed, it often highlights the contrast between falsehood and truth. We are reminded of the importance of living with honesty, transparency, and integrity in all our dealings. We see the damage that deceit and manipulation can cause, and it motivates us to be more genuine in our own lives. Exposure pushes us to live our values and be true to who God has called us to be, even when it's difficult or when the world encourages us to compromise. God uses exposure to deepen our reliance on Him, to build our character, and to teach us to trust in His timing and purpose. The process of exposure is never easy, but it's always a means of spiritual growth. As we navigate the truth of a situation, we are becoming more like Christ, growing in the fruit of the Spirit, patience, kindness, self-control, and love. Exposure may not be something we welcome, but it is a necessary part of our spiritual journey that ultimately strengthens us and draws us closer to God. In the end, exposure is a tool in God's hands. It shapes our character, refines our hearts, and makes us more like Him. It's a painful but necessary process that teaches us to respond with grace, to grow in discernment, and to live with integrity. Every moment of exposure is an opportunity for us to become more mature in our faith and more equipped to handle the challenges of life with strength, wisdom, and grace. Exposure reveals the power of forgiveness and restoration. When the truth about someone or something is exposed, it often comes with pain, betrayal, or heartbreak. But in the midst of that pain, God presents us with the opportunity to forgive and move forward. Exposure isn't just about revealing the flaws or true nature of others. It's also about revealing the strength of God's forgiveness and the incredible healing that forgiveness brings to our own heart. When we are hurt or deceived, our first reaction is often to seek justice or revenge, to hold on to anger and bitterness. But God calls us to a higher standard, a standard of forgiveness. Forgiving those who have wronged us isn't easy. It goes against our natural instinct. However, when we embrace forgiveness, we allow God to do a work of restoration, not just in the relationship, but also in our own hearts. Through forgiveness, we release the power that the hurt or betrayal has over us and invite God to heal and restore us. We trust that God will take care of the justice and vengeance, leaving us free to focus on our healing and growth. Forgiveness is also a powerful reminder that none of us are beyond God's grace. When we face exposure and are confronted with the truth about the actions or intentions of others, it often brings to light our own imperfections, weaknesses, and shortcomings. In those moments, we are reminded that just as we need to forgive others, we too need God's forgiveness. Exposure strips us of our self-righteousness and reminds us that we are all in need of redemption. When we extend forgiveness to others, we reflect the forgiveness that God has so freely given to us. Restoration, too, is a crucial part of the process. While forgiveness is essential, God doesn't just call us to forgive and move on. He also calls us to seek restoration where possible. In some situations, relationships can be healed and strengthened after exposure, especially if both parties are willing to acknowledge the truth, repent, and seek reconciliation. Restoration isn't always easy or immediate, but it is a powerful part of God's plan. He doesn't just want us to forgive and forget. He desires for us to be whole and for broken relationships to be mended. Through His grace, restoration is possible even when it feels impossible. God uses exposure to teach us the depths of His love. When we extend forgiveness to those who have wronged us, we mirror the love and grace that God shows us every day. His love for us is unconditional and everlasting, and as we embrace forgiveness, we open ourselves up to receive more of that love. Exposure reveals the cracks and wounds in our hearts, but it also gives us the opportunity to allow God's love to fill those spaces and restore us to wholeness. While exposure can bring pain, it also brings the opportunity for a new beginning, a fresh start rooted in forgiveness and the hope of restoration. God doesn't leave us broken. He uses exposure to heal us. As we forgive, as we seek restoration, we grow closer to God and more deeply rooted in His love and grace. We realize that exposure, though difficult, is part of the journey to becoming more like Christ, learning to forgive as He forgives and to restore as He restores. In the end, exposure teaches us that forgiveness is not a one-time act, but a continual process that leads to healing, growth, and restoration. It opens the door to God's transforming power in our lives. Through forgiveness, we let go of the pain of the past and step into the freedom that God offers. Exposure reveals the truth, but it also reveals the power of forgiveness, allowing us to walk in the freedom that comes from releasing the hurt and embracing God's healing love. Exposure ultimately brings us closer to God's purpose for our lives. While the process of exposure is often painful and challenging, it is also an essential part of our spiritual journey. God does not expose the truth to harm us. He does it to align us more closely with His divine will. When we face the truth, whether it's about others, a situation, or ourselves, it opens our eyes to the reality of where we are and where God is leading us. Exposure forces us to reevaluate our paths, our relationships, and our priorities, helping us realign with the purpose God has set for us. The discomfort of exposure often makes us feel vulnerable, but in that vulnerability, God draws us nearer to Him. It is in these moments of truth that we are called to lean not on our own understanding or strength, but to fully rely on God. Exposure helps us shed the distractions and false comforts that might have been clouding our vision, enabling us to walk more clearly in God's direction. It can be a wake-up call that redirects us toward a more fulfilling and aligned life, one that is in tune with God's plan and purpose. Exposure is also a reminder that God's plans for us are always bigger and better than what we can imagine. When the truth is exposed, we may not immediately see how it fits into God's grand design, but as we trust Him, we begin to see how He uses even the hardest experiences to shape us for His purpose. It's in these times that we discover the depth of His love, His wisdom, and His ability to turn everything good or bad into something that works together for our good and His glory. Exposure, when viewed through the lens of faith, becomes a tool that moves us closer to fulfilling the destiny God has for us. When we face exposure, it may be tempting to get bogged down by the pain, anger, or frustration. However, God uses these times to draw us deeper into relationship with Him. As we trust in His guidance, lean on His strength, and follow His lead, we begin to see how exposure is not the end, but rather a step toward our ultimate purpose. It's a refining process, shaping us into the people God intends for us to be. Ultimately, exposure is part of God's plan to position us for greater effectiveness, deeper peace, and a more vibrant connection with Him. So when God exposes the truth, we can rest assured that He is guiding us towards something better. Exposure isn't something to fear or avoid, but an opportunity to realign with God's perfect purpose for our lives. It's a gift, even when it's hard, because it brings us closer to the path God has set before us, a path of purpose, peace, and divine fulfillment.